Welcome to Crushgasm, the podcast dedicated to the highs and lows of crushes from their first to their worst. We're going to cover them all with a cascade of characters, including our guest today, a Scholastic Book Fair champion, me. I'm still in my 90s bag over here, reveling in the love Backstreet Boy fans have been getting since their Vegas residency at the Sphere kicked off in July, but I'd like to switch my focus by crushing on and celebrating the 30th anniversary of a movie that truly means the world to me. Not only because I devoured the books as a kid or because I loved the Netflix series, but because this movie celebrates all the ships from the obvious like friendship and entrepreneurship to relationships. Shout out to Logan and Marianne. Yes, I'm talking about 1995's The Babysitters Club. But before we get to the movie, let's talk about the road that led us to the big screen. Like with most things, there needs to be a market for it. In 1985, an editor at Scholastic noticed there was a book getting a lot of attention from readers called Katie's Babysitting Job. For some reason, instead of getting Katie's author, Martha Towles, on the line, the editor contacted Ann M. Martin about crafting a series about the idea of babysitting. By 1986, the world was introduced to the Babysitters Club via the debut, Christie's Great Idea. I've recently reread this one, and it truly is a great idea. Pun definitely intended. The way Ann and Martin set up each character was brilliant. I mean, for a book geared towards young readers, it's clear in explaining every character, a pretty clear plot, and by the end you've attached yourself to one of the sitters. Tomboy leader, you're a Christy. Shy and sensitive, you're Marianne. Fashionable and creative, Claudia. Can't stop talking about where you once lived, well, you're Stacy. It was that simple. Like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which would actually drop their animated series a year later. Anyways, back to the sitters. The book series proved to be successful, with Ann and Martin busting out the original 35 books, which would round out the club with California Cool Girl Dawn, 2 junior members, Mallory and Jesse, and even Logan, Marianne's boyfriend and first alternate member of the club. Fast forward to the 90s, 1990 to be exact, the book series had done so well that Hollywood came a-knocking. The first ever live-action iteration of the series, consisting of 1 season and 13 episodes, ran on HBO for a few years, but that was just enough to introduce the series to the next wave of future readers. So when the Scholastic Book Fair hit elementary schools in the 90s, it was apparent this series still had some legs, which then leads us to the 1995 masterpiece, The Babysitters Club movie. No shade to the sitters who first gave us our initial live-action BSC members, but the movie blew them out of the water. The HBO series had this very drab feel, like if Little House on the Prairies was placed in the 90s, the movie? It was 1995, and movies like Clueless, Casper, and Jumanji proved that young moviegoers were heading to the theater more often than not. Which it's wild that Clueless is the classic that it is because it actually didn't fare as well as either Casper or Jumanji in theaters that year. And neither did The Babysitters Club. But hey, it's still one of the most beloved and cherished movies of the millennial girl experience. So we're celebrating because in the end, that movie, like the book series, is a fabulous addition to the girl power era that was the 90s. It's strange to look back and think of the mid-90s, or any time, as a great time to be a woman because on the surface, it was. You had women gaining strides in both politics and the everyday workplaces, and new laws and focus on sexual harassment laws and consequences. However, while we were being sold this idea, in the long run, women were still being pushed to the back of the minds of society for everything except when it came to sexualization, which the 2000s really took and ran with. However, let's look back at what the 90s was for an innocent kid who was just watching The Babysitters Club in theater or later on VHS, as that was a dream come true for avid readers. So the movie is pretty cut and dry for a kid's movie. The club is already established, which I appreciate. We didn't need a backstory movie. The books had been out for almost a decade. We didn't need Christy to tell us about her first great idea again. Instead, we got her next one, a summer camp where all the kids they sat for during the school year could attend, and in turn, the girls would be all together all summer. Dream come true, right? Side note about this not being an origin story because the fans were already familiar with the characters. Superhero movies, take a lesson here. Anyways, back to BSC. The movie also presents a number of other dramatic scenarios, like Christy's deadbeat dad coming for a visit with the most hideous dress known to man, Stacy and Claudia going to New York with a 17-year-old boy, and the popular girls trying to sabotage this club at every turn. There are also secrets, pranks, tears, friendship, and an ice cream cake. It's truly a perfect watch for anyone 7 to 14 years old. I'll likely go over my favorite moments in a written post, but some that stick out that I'll talk about now, I'll never let go of, are, the way Christy makes that peanut butter sandwich. I think it's perhaps the fat kid in me, but food scenes, they always stick with me. Again, Stacy and Claudia hanging out with a 17-year-old in New York City, no less. And then that boy talking about how she'll be 14. Boy, that would make you then 18. Luca needed to pump the brakes and leave that middle schooler alone. Next, I have always loved Logan and Marianne's relationship, not only age appropriate, but I do appreciate that it was utilized in this movie because a shy girl getting the guy in a movie is a win for all the shy girls in reality. It gave us hope. Much like Devon Sawa kissing not one, but 3 tomboys. Hello, Christina Ricci twice in Casper and in Now and then Icebox and Little Giant. Lastly, I truly love the end of this movie where they all come together for Christy's birthday. Even though she has been sort of a biatch all summer, they still rally for her because in the end, friendship is everything. Story aside, what was also perfect about this movie, the cast. You could not and cannot tell me the casting department did knock it out of the park when they rounded up these girls and even a couple of guys. They took Anna Martin's very vivid explanations of each girl and brought them to life perfectly, especially Marianne. Rachel Lee Cook is everything as Marianne, and this is probably a little biased as she has always been my favorite character in the series since I grew up a little on the shy side. I like to say that I could care less about your birth sign, but if you tell me which babysitter club member you vibe with most, that's all the information I'm going to need to know everything about you. Rachel Lee Cook wasn't alone though. Skylar Fisk was an excellent girl boss as Christy, Brie Blair was the picture-perfect former New Yorker Stacy, Trisha Joe was Claudia come to life, Larissa Olenek, who was everything in the 90s as Alex Mack, she was also everything you imagined Dawn to be, and Stacey Lynn Ramshauer and Zelda Harris were wonderful additions as the junior members. Was really happy they had them in there too. I think it would have felt off. It was just the 5 girls. The 7 of them were cast wonderfully and they delivered what is probably my second favorite movie from this year about friendship and the power of girlhood as a youngster. Sorry, my apologies, but Now and Then is my favorite when it comes to that genre. You can't beat Christina Ricci and Devon Sawa, which Ricci and Sawa's 2 films together in which they share a smooch were both released in 1995. Millennials, this was our most cultured year next to 1999. I do say so myself. Going back to the girlhood of this movie, friendships are really put on the line due to Christy and Marianne trying to keep the secret that Christy's dad is back in town. Even as an adult, I have no clue why they thought they needed to hide that information from their friends. What were they going to do? Demand to meet this random man who made pancakes out of his RV? No girl, no one wants to meet your dad like that. Of course, though, in the end, friendship prevails, and it's a happily ever after. And really, in a sea of films like Clueless and Now and Then and even this, all from the same year, all of these movies help set up the latter half of the 90s for millennial girl power. Because the following year, the world was introduced to not only Lilith Fair, which every millennial who loved VH1 was so impressed by, but also the debut from the Spice Girls. The foundation of the power of friendship was laid by cinema in 1995 and only grew with the introduction of Wannabe a year later. Just a reminder though, The Babysitter's Club was not a huge box office success, but like with many movies from that time, it gained popularity with its VH1 release, and as the rentals grew, so did the love of the books. The series would eventually publish new babysitting adventures until the year 2000, which makes sense in hindsight. By the year 2000, core millennials were aging out of things considered for kids and looking forward to the teen angst that was awaiting them in the 21st century, as the unprecedented events were just beginning. And of course, we all know by now that American pop culture loves to revisit things, and not even a decade later, the first BSC graphic novel hit shelves in 2006. In more recent years, the BSC have continued in that realm for new readers, and in 2020 even came back to life via a Netflix series, which I love the movie dearly. It is what we are here to celebrate after 30 years, but with just 2 short-lived seasons, the Netflix series became my favorite live-action iteration of the book series. Netflix managed to blend the innocence and beauty of the first kind of books and movies with the modern world, keeping the characters very similar in theory, but also updating them to create a diverse cast that reflected current times. Somehow, Netflix gave Stranger Things 49 years to make 5 seasons, but ultimately axed BSC after 2. Even though it was probably cheaper to make, it was loved by critics and fans alike, and even scored some awards for the streaming service. Alas, it proved that no matter how far we get from Christie's great idea back in 1986, there will always be an audience of young girls ready to attach themselves to the stories of a group of babysitters in Stony Brook, USA. If you'd like to watch the Babysitters Club movie as of August 2025, you can rent it on Amazon Prime. You can check out the original TV series there as well, or on YouTube, and of course, the Netflix series is still streaming there. As for the books, every local library has them on lock. They're always in stores and also available at the link below. If you're my age, the books low-key still hold up. If you have little ones, please get them off Roblox and introduce them to the Babysitters Club. Children need to value reading, and the BSC is one of those series that definitely can get a kid hooked on reading. With that, thank you so much for taking the time to listen to me gush about the Babysitters Club. Everyone, you can find all of Crushgasm's information below, and until next time, as always, keep crushing it. Crushgasm is part of the I Did Not Make These Rankings podcast network, along with some other pretty cool shows, including An Evening at the Movies, Crime Rewind, Literature Reapers, Love is Black, Masturbators, Men Are the Prize, Season to Season, The Sip List, and Toontastic Journeys. You can go to idnmtrpodcastnetwork.blog to find not only Crushgasm, but all of the aforementioned really cool podcasts. Alrighty.